Hello, and thank you for joining me today to learn about the Illinois State Board of Education's process for developing our fiscal year 2025 budget recommendation for pre-K through 12th grade public education in Illinois. My name is Dr. Christine Benson, and I am the chair of the State Board's Finance and Audit Committee. On behalf of my fellow board members and ISBE staff, we look forward to hearing your testimony and receiving your funding requests. Your voices and the information you share with us will shape our understanding of the needs of Illinois' public schools, so we can make a budget recommendation to the Governor and General Assembly that truly reflects the resources that our students need to strive. We hope this short presentation on the state's elementary and secondary education budget will help guide you in developing your testimony and funding requests. The State Board seeks to align our budget recommendation to our strategic plan and goals. I encourage you to take the time to review the plan on the agency's website. The strategic plan was designed in partnership with all education stakeholders from around the state and deeply informed by their input and feedback. It provides a roadmap to provide each and every student in our state with safe and engaging schools, excellent teachers, and equitable learning opportunities. The board strongly encourages each of you to provide testimony and/or request funding for FY 2025 that is aligned to one or more of the three board goals: student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. Funding requests that provide specific examples of desired outcomes or metrics, if the request were funded, help the board to make more informed decisions for resource allocation. The information you provide is valuable to the agency in its effort to support and advocate for your funding request. Here you see longitudinal information regarding education funding from state general funds compared to the overall general funds state budget since fiscal year 2007. As you can see from the two-line graphs, education funding in total has steadily increased over recent years. Education funding has grown significantly since the enactment of the new evidence-based funding formula in August 2017, with a $5.2 billion increase from fiscal year 2017 to fiscal year 2024. In fiscal years 2018 through 2024, nearly $1.9 billion has been distributed in new tier funding as part of the evidence-based funding formula. Tier funding is the portion of the formula that directs all increases in funding primarily to school districts furthest away from adequate funding. While these significant increases in funding are terrific news for education, elected officials will continue to have to make difficult choices during the fiscal year 2025 budget process. Your proposed funding request should reflect overall educational priorities in terms of equity and focus on the greatest overall return for every child. This pie graph demonstrates that Illinois schools are reliant on local property taxes as the primary source of funding for education. However, evidence-based funding has made significant strides toward increasing the state's share of education funding, especially for the districts that are the least well-funded. The next pie graph shows that 80% of the $10.4 billion in general funds for the education budget is allocated to evidence-based funding. School districts can use these funds in an unrestricted manner to meet their local needs. They can hire staff teachers, fund construction, buy supplies and instructional materials, and purchase or provide any other activities and materials that their schools need. Mandated categorical programs, or NCAPs, make up another 11%. These line items reimburse school districts for specific costs, including transportation, school meals, and certain special education costs for students served in facilities separate from the district. The next largest portion of funding is for early childhood education. ISBE administers multiple grants to provide services for low-income families from birth through preschool. State funding for early childhood education has increased by approximately $280 million since fiscal year 2017 to expand access to these services and increase the quality of programming. The remaining 3% of the budget is dedicated to other programs, such as the new Teacher Vacancy Grant Pilot Program, career and technical education, agricultural education, alternative schools for students who are not succeeding in the traditional school environment, after-school programs, and federally funded required assessments. Although these other programs are smaller in the scope of the overall general funds budget, the importance and impact of these other programs is critical in meeting the needs of an incredibly diverse student population with increasingly complex and interconnected needs. In addition, the agency received approximately 0.25% of the general funds budget to provide guidance, oversight, and programmatic support to the state schools and districts. It's important in talking about the budget to take a closer look at the evidence-based funding formula, which makes up the bulk of education funds in our state. EBF performs calculations in 3 general stages. First, the formula determines an adequacy target for each district, which approximates the cost of providing a minimum standard of education to all students according to best practices for class sizes, staffing, supplies, and other resources. The adequacy target calculation takes into consideration the variance of costs for things like teacher salaries in different parts of the state by applying a regionalization factor. The second stage is the determination of the current resources of each district, including the district's base funding minimum from the prior year EBF distributions, the district's property wealth in comparison to all districts throughout the state, and the personal property replacement tax receipts. Lastly, the formula compares the district's current resources to its adequacy target to determine the district's percentage of adequacy, or how far away the district currently is from having the resources it needs. Districts are grouped into tiers based on this percentage of adequacy, and the formula ensures the districts with the lowest percentage of adequacy receive the greatest amount of new state funding, also called tier funding. Every year, each district will receive what it got in evidence-based funding the year before, plus its allocations of new money or tier funding. This ensures that no district will ever receive less funding and provides more stability for districts to be able to plan and budget. Slide 9 provides a snapshot of a few results from the fiscal year 2024 evidence-based funding formula. The percentage of adequacy ranges from 61.9% to 375.6%, which continues to tell us that Illinois students are educated in schools nested in communities with vastly different histories and resources. However, steady increases in investment in EBF has helped us reach a new milestone. For the first time ever, 0 districts are funded at or below 60% of adequacy in FY 2024. When EBF was enacted in FY 2018, only 146 districts were fully funded. Now, 232 districts are fully funded. Unfortunately, nearly 7 out of 10 students are in districts that have an adequacy percentage less than 90%. This is impacting 94 of 102 counties and illustrates the significant need for additional funds for the evidence-based funding formula. Evidence-based funding takes a huge step in the right direction towards equity and ensuring that our children's access to quality education in Illinois does not depend on their family's personal wealth. Slide 10 shows the average percentage of adequacy in FY 2024 compared to the previous fiscal years for evidence-based funding. As you can see, the average percentage of adequacy, especially for Tier 1 districts, which are the least well-funded, has steadily increased since fiscal year 2018. The average percentage of adequacy for Tier 1 increased 22 points from 59.2% in FY 2018 to 72.4% in FY 24. The bar chart on this slide provides the history of base funding minimum amounts and the tier distribution amounts by fiscal year since the inception of the EBF formula. As noted previously, nearly $1.9 billion in tier funding has been distributed in FY 2018 through FY 2024. In FY 2021, school districts still received the base funding minimum, but there were no funds available for tier distributions. The last slide illustrates additional investments are needed for EBF. The state would need to invest an additional $2.5 billion in EBF to fund 100% of Illinois school districts, at least at 90% adequacy. The board and ISBE staff hope you will make your voice heard by submitting a funding request, which you should do in writing through our online form at www.isbe.net/budget request form, all one word. You are also invited to attend one of the 3 hearings during the month of October. The hearings are scheduled to be conducted in Springfield on October 3rd and 2 virtual hearings on the 5th and 30th. The board gives equal weight to all written requests and oral testimony. In January, based upon the deliberations of the State Board, the ISBE staff, and your testimony, the board will prepare a detailed budget recommendation and submit it to the Governor and General Assembly. After the State Board submits its recommendation, the Governor will prepare a draft budget for all state services, such as the Department of Transportation, Department of Children and Family Services, and so on, and submit it to the General Assembly in mid-February. The General Assembly will hold hearings and review the budget proposals throughout much of the spring. At the end of May, the House and the Senate will pass a budget and send it on to the Governor to be signed into law. Thank you so much for watching this webinar. And on behalf of my fellow board members, we look forward to your testimony and funding requests.